which weapons can push and which ones not.
This is the Kitsune clan, a group of sword enthusiasts who like cosplay, reenactment, and historical martial arts. If you have similar interests, feel welcomed.
So, what is this about? Yeah, there are weapons with which we can push an incoming attack away. We've demonstrated that with axes of different types, for example. And so the question is, can it push? And that applies to quite some different weapons, because some of them look like they could push, and for some we have a good feeling that they can. So we'll go through them step by step. And the idea is very simple. We take an attack from angle 1. No, not 1. We do 10. And I'll see how good the pushing works. And you have to admit I'm not perfect at this, and I also make mistakes. So sometimes the weapon slips, but that's then not necessarily the fault of the weapon, but it's just a matter of my incapability of doing that correctly. In other cases, you will see that the weapon shape allows something like pushing, and in other cases, it simply does not do that too well. Have a look yourself in the following. Why should you care about that? It's an interesting aspect of a weapon if it can push, because it also means it can lock. If you have that as a side weapon, so at the left hand if you're right-handed, this can offer you quite some possibilities. I really like, for example, using a cutlass in the right hand and a tomahawk in the left hand. You can deflect an attack with the cutlass and bind the hand after deflection, for example, with a tomahawk, or also use it to hook and disarm, of course. But I like this pushing option quite a bit. Importantly, this is really specific to the individual weapon design. We've used here, for example, a Japanese kama that has a real nice corner that allows for some pushing. If you have some of these modern style kamas where the top side is more rounded and the shaft does not expand beyond the blade, then it's more like the sickle that we also tested, and you will see that this is suboptimal. Sometimes it's also a matter of the direction of the weapon. If we take, for example, the Chinese hook sword, then the hook side is not so good at pushing. On the other hand, it doesn't really matter because it has a really good hand protection. So if the pushing fails and the blade of the opponent slides down, it will be caught by the hand protection, which also works. And that also applies to some other weapons. But for the Chinese hook sword, we can turn it around, so to say, in Mordschlag, and then it's a very good pusher because of this hand protection that is now in the distant side, and we can nicely push away an incoming attack, and we could also lock away quite something. Something that was similar in this aspect to the hook sword is the flame blade from Zelda. And when we tested this weapon originally, I came to the point that it's a nice blade destroyer because it really killed one of our cosplay swords. And I did not pay too much attention about historical accuracy with this thing. And then somebody pointed out to me that there is a Chinese weapon with 7 such prongs in arrangement that was a real historical thing. And I think that this was a really good pusher or catcher of a blade. And so this is something I can add on here. The tip is not super pushy, but these lateral protrusions, these sideways protrusions, they not only push a blade away, they also catch it nicely. So what's the point of all this? Is this now a good overview of weapons? No, we just took what we had around and where we had a suspicion. So I probably will have to do more of these experimentations concerning pushing. And we have now also tested it only against a katana type sword. I think there are other weapons that need to be tested, whether they can properly be pushed away or not. What surprised me quite a bit is this strange mace here that we managed to push very, very nicely. But I think the trick is that this round head is just very large, and therefore it basically has something like a flat area. If this ball would be smaller, it would probably slip quite a bit. I've been also already pointing out that, for example, the keyblades that so many people hate, and some have claimed the keyblade would be worse than a stick, can push quite well if you take it also in Mordschlag position. And I especially like this one we used here for doing so because In Mortschlag, it has a nice hand protection, but this distant part for pushing almost resembling an axe, and it's working really, really well. We could have immediately tested whether all the weapons that can push can also hook, but I guess that's also something for the future. And then I have the suspicion that some of these weapons are better in pushing than at hooking, which is maybe a bit counterintuitive, but the fact that this big mace was very successful at pushing, and I think it will probably perform not so well at hooking. And then also the Chinese hook sword, which is already named for the second function, and it will hook very good, I'm pretty sure, cannot push so well, so it's not a one-to-one match. But these simple mechanical properties of weapons make some of them very, very special, and we already should be pretty aware that a stick does neither push nor hook very well, and that's also true for most swords. Although you can take the sword in Mordschlag, and we already know this can push, right? And we can see here that it can push. So also this demands for some more precise view. It's not that easily dismissed that something is not good at a specific task if we don't test it. And other people have tested a lot of weapons in how far you can throw them, and I think that will also be something to be done. And of course, interaction of different weapons is also a much underappreciated, or let's say underexplored frame that we will have to do in the future. For this one here, I have to say there are not so many weapons that really surprised me deeply. Some pushed a bit better than I expected. The mace, for example, some pushed a bit less well than I expected, but as pointed out, most of them were clear that they have a certain push capability. And the only thing here is really I was surprised how bad I am with some of them. On the other hand, that might have been something to do with the way you aim with these, because although if some can push better than others, it's also a matter of with which point of the weapon you have to aim. If you think, for example, the tonfa with the forward, outward, inward, however you want to call that, sideways projecting grip, that is going forward, right? So if you push, you have to aim a bit inside the weapon. If you have the tomahawk that has this classical T shape in the end, you don't have to do that. You can aim with the middle of the weapon towards the incoming weapon. And that might be a factor where I'm not yet that good at, and that might require some construction work. So putting the weapon on paper and look where this point is, and that could be also a factor that groups some of them together, in the sense of if you have mastered pushing with one of these, that it requires less effort to do that with another one. I'm, for example, still not sure where the exact point is for the hook sword. That's probably one of the most critical ones. And I'm also not entirely sure where a good point for pushing with the sickle is. That's something to explore further. For the moment, I have to say we hope we could inspire you, and we hope to see you around next time.